Okay, it's 4 o'clock and I'll call the meeting to order. Mary, would you read the governor's remote policy, please?
Yep. So good afternoon. This open meeting on July 21st of the Town Area Plan Work Group, a subcommittee of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission, is being convening by video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. This meeting is being recorded. Please be aware other people may be able to see you and take care not to share your device's screen. This meeting will feature public comment if there are any members of the public present. And Henry, why don't you go ahead with the roll call?
Okay. Mary.
I'm here.
Good. Lee.
Here.
Allison.
Present.
Marcia.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi.
You got your hair done. Very nice.
Yes, go on.
And I'm here. Mickey is at the doctor's and Mary Ann will not be attending. Okay, we have a quorum. Approval of the agenda. Any additions, deletions, changes?
Move
I'll take
approval.
it. Please. Mary, is there a second?
Second, Marcia.
Mary and Marcia, all in favor, aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Carries. Approval of the draft minutes from June 16th. Any discussion? Nope, good. All right. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Mary,
Allison seconded.
Mary and who seconded?
Allison.
okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. Okay, Allison, are you ready?
Yes.
Very good. It's all yours.
I have, bear with me one second. I said I'm ready, now I have to look at the document. Give me 1 second, please.
No problem.
Okay, so may I share my screen?
Yep, go ahead. Is that showing you economic development plan draft?
Yes.
Okay. So I apologize for the fact that there's no date on the third line. It should be today's date. I will amend and send it to you, Lee. This is, sorry. Okay. Mary Longmaker and I are members of the Economic Development Subcommittee. We've taken one stab at this document, but I think it's time for the group to see where we are and discuss some of the open items. So at the beginning of the document, I copied over the vision statement that I found in earlier drafts that were circulated. And then we started to discuss the proximity to downtown and the impact on our businesses within our area. And the CXX and XX is parking and I can't remember the other one, but it's sort of cross-referencing traffic and parking. So because of just we wanted to make sure that people understood the impact of those things on our economic development within our area. The next section we put something down about housing. This is mostly supported by what the survey results said. So we say that economic development of the town area is reliant on increasing the density of residents in the area throughout the year. Therefore, this committee surveyed the area residents to ask about ways in which to increase rental housing and to identify factors which would support more year-round residents. There's a lot of language. Henry, do you want me to read it as I go, or is everyone reading along? I just want to make sure we have.
If you want to hit the high points, that's fine. I'm reading
Okay.
along.
Okay, so we looked at some of the responses that people had where the suggestions were to provide legal and tax help and possibly financial assistance to people in the area who want to create permissible rental space and to become potential landlords. Then we talked about some of the things that would make quality of life here and also the economic prosperity of the region a little bit better, which is reliable Wi-Fi, more restaurants open year-round. This is to entice people to live here year-round. Comprehensive healthcare, more commercial flights available during the winter months, high-quality education and daycare, and then road repair, parking enforcement, bike paths, and affordable housing. And then one respondent requests the town of Nantucket reduce or subsidize utility rates for those who live here year-round. Then this is a note to the team that some of the survey responses are not possible. One person suggested a list of acceptable renters. I think that would fall into a discrimination issue for the town if they were to, for anyone actually, that if they were to create such a list. And then the squatting rules, or the rules for squatters in Massachusetts, cause an issue. And then we talked about how the parking issues are a concern that obviously we have a section of our team working on, but also just we know is a problem, and whether or not that can be addressed is sort of questionable. We talked about how Lee's email to the police captain explaining about parking enforcement was one such example of how we're not sure how to go forward with that part. The next section is to talk about the businesses themselves in our area. And Mary and I talked about the ones who are here that we think we know about because of the WPI students survey that was done that I have at the end of this document. We had the students at WPI did a survey of all businesses in the entire island. So I'm going through and trying to limit the streets just within our area. But it's a little clunky, and there's a couple of reasons. One is a lot of people may be running businesses, but they don't indicate what the business name is. So does that include people who are running construction companies, for instance, and their home office is within our area? So I wrote there, please see the notes to understand the weakness in the approach of looking at the WPI survey. So I think that's something that we should consider as a group. There's also a lot of businesses, and I talked to the Artists Association of Nantucket and asked them if they had a list of artists by zip code or not zip code, I'm sorry, by address. And I think we know that the executive director of AAN is currently on family leave. So I asked about a year ago, maybe a year and a half. So I'm not sure we're going to get that, but it's something I think we should discuss when we put together our document, which is that there are makers in our region who may or may not consider or even consider themselves a business, but yet they are, and they're important to the economy of the area. We also talked about businesses that work within our area but are not domiciled in the area. So we had some examples like landscapers, construction crews, caretakers for homes, dog groomers, cleaning crews, sanitation companies, utilities and other home and lawn care, ghost tours, ice cream trucks. So I made a statement here at the end. It would not be possible to catalog all of these businesses. You may disagree with me, but I don't know how we would sort of come up with a quantifiable. I think we can sort of discuss it as in general, but I'm not sure we can say that there are exactly 15 ghost tours that come in the area. So I'm not sure how we do that. The questions that we sort of have for the group are, should we talk about additional accommodations for construction and maintenance workers or additional restrictions for those? Like which direction, or if at all, do we want to talk about that? There were some examples given: gas leaf blower restrictions, parking enforcement, noise and trash problems. Then would pop-up shops or weekend installations be something we would welcome? Sconset has the Bartlett Farm Truck. Main Street has the Bartlett Farm Truck. So there could be others in this area. And then what kind of help would we want the town to consider to encourage businesses to be open year-round? Some examples are limits on seasonal alcohol licenses and requiring the restaurants to be open. Mary's suggestion was that we ask Amy Baxter perhaps to come and speak to the group about that issue. Then we have some good quotes that we pulled from for our recommendations, which you can see here. We're currently working on reviewing the responses of year-round residents versus summer residents, because Mary has access to those breakdowns. And here are some points below that. Mary, do you want to talk about anything in this section to bring to people's attention?
It's not top of mind for me right now. So.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. So I went quickly, and there's a lot to digest, but I wanted to pause and get people's thoughts.
So Allison, this is Lee. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Yes, there are open questions. And so I will start off with two observations, one from today and one a little more general. Today, as I drove home on New Street, I realized we had Murray's Warehouse on New Street, Joe's Barber on Pleasant Street, and Flock on Orange Street.
Mhm.
Okay, that's today. The broader issue, because I don't want to be known as the guy who just throws petals, flower petals up, is that at one time when Nantucket was primarily a walking village, there were little shops close to where people lived. Flock was the Nantucket Bake Shop. Halfway between Flock and downtown was Ryder's. Henry remembers Ryder's. So does Bert Ryder. He told me it was right there at number 45 or 47 Orange Street. It was a package store. According to Jeanette Topham, there were more. There was a little convenience store on Orange Street at approximately number 60 or 70. We remember Rebimbus's, which became Fay and
Fromagerie.
Fromagerie, yeah, and is now a private home. So the question is, do we suggest to the town that there be more encouragement in the zoning code for mixed retail and residency? Because right now the zoning code tends to exclude commercial from R5, R10, et cetera. I think it requires special. Mary, you might know more than, because I didn't think to look it up before I started speaking. Done.
So some of the responses that we got said no more businesses in this area. And but I think it's a trend that we definitely want to discuss, that you know, in the past there were many small local businesses, and the walkability that people love so much, you know, allowed them to not have to get in a car and go to Stop and Shop. But that trend may be happening because people like it too. So, you know, those of us who've been here a long time and have memories of businesses, you know, and wish they were still here, are, you know, of a different mindset than those that have maybe been here less than 20 years and have never known any of those businesses that we remember. And to them, it would be a reverse trend to have businesses start popping up. I mean, I've seen a lot of guest houses convert to private residences. You know, some of the other shops that have existed are gone. And there are few left. I mean, you're in a semi-commercial area where you are, which is interesting. I mean, I remember Barry Thurston's or Barry Fisher's, I forget which one, tackle shop on New Lane. It's gone. You know,
Fisher.
Barry Fisher, yeah. And so, you know, it used to be that people had businesses at home. Elizabeth Gilbert's Craft Center on the corner of Main Street or on Quaker Road near Main Street. And it's a trend that I'm not sure anybody who is more recently here wants to reverse. And that was kind of what I saw in the comments that were submitted, even though We also had many comments about how nice it is to be walkable and how nice it is to have shops that you can go to. So I'm not sure where we're going to come out on that. And I think that's the kind of topic that it would be great to have at a public meeting, to have people talk about, you know, in real time.
Yeah. And Mary, one of the constraints on small businesses in our area is parking. Left over from the bake shop, outside Flock, it still says 30-minute parking only. Flock
I
is
don't think it's left over. I think that's still an active commercial zone for them.
yeah.
Riders was actually like a grocery store, package store. They burnt down and rebuilt, but the big thing was they couldn't compete with Finest.
Yeah.
And that because we are so much more densely occupied with residential, that means there's more competition for those parking spaces. And so parking for a business has a greater impact on the neighborhood than it used to.
Part of what we're trying to say, though, is that the walking village is a workable one and one that is a part of Nantucket's history, as you pointed out, and not a bad goal. Right? If I could walk instead of drive to a place and get cheese. I remember trying to park at Fayette Fromagerie and fearing for my life, right? Because there was only that one spot in front of the house. So I would love to be able to sort of walk. Someone told me that Flock still sells bread, so I haven't walked over there yet. But like the idea is that if we had a mixed use-ish town, there wouldn't be as much need for parking because the people who live here sort of could walk around. I didn't see in what one point I didn't mention when I was sharing my screen is that we looked at sort of transportation in and out. Obviously there's a discussion in another group, but the idea if there was a bus system that you could get from Washington Street to Stop and Shop area, Mid-Island, like that would be, and then back, as opposed to having to go the entire loop around, would create sort of an easier way for people in town to not have to drive. So part of this was sort of what makes quality of life better in town. And that's more people, more residents, but also less driving. And sort of and also a varied economy, like one that people can feel a part of what's happening in this sort of. That's why I really wanted to also include artists when we talk about who's in the area. I know everyone knows that there's an artist at the end of my street on Fair, and he has a gallery, but there are other artists in the area who are not showing their work, but they are doing their work. So I think it would be. I think we should encourage, obviously it's for group discussion, but I think encouraging sort of diversity in town as to what's available to people is a good thing. Without twisting, or I mean, I don't think we need to. I think I believe there used to be an auto repair shop around the corner from my house on Hillard. So I mean, they exist, and I think the zoning, I believe the zoning allows it. I might be wrong, but that could be a good conversation to have with someone who knows the zoning better than I do. Oh, we also talked about bicycles. It'd be nice if they were a safer bike route than having to share traffic with Orange Street to get out of town.
It's interesting. I had this thought this morning. The irony of all the places that are going car free and doing, blocking off the street for either part of the day or part of the week or part of the year. The irony here is that the only vehicle that works on a cobblestone street is a car. Bicycles and scooters and skateboards, and they don't work on cobblestones. So it doesn't make sense for Nantucket to go car free downtown on the cobblestones because you don't have any other option. And at the same time, if you did car free on another street, it doesn't fit right. So that was a little, I was looking at an article about a place that, is for the summer, they've gone car free, and thought about Nantucket for that. It's like, but that doesn't.
The biggest example, Mary, is Bermuda. The island of Bermuda is car free. That's not to say there aren't gas powered taxis and a whole host of golf carts. But cars, I think, are banned.
Mackinac Island is too. The only vehicles there are the fire department.
Yeah,
And
Catalina
interestingly,
Island.
they just banned e-bikes.
Wow.
Sorry, Henry, where was that?
I said Mackinac Island is just banned
Okay,
e-bikes
yeah. You'd be familiar with that.
a little bit.
So we did also get some suggestions for different businesses that people wanted. And I think probably the most common word was affordable,
Mhm.
which is not something that is easy to produce.
No, but if we had more people renting guest cottages or rooms in their house, that does then create more affordable housing.
No, I meant
Yeah,
the goods being sold would be
Sorry, Mary.
affordable.
Sorry,
I'm
Mary.
sorry.
You were speaking?
I was saying that I was referring to affordable as in the price of the goods being sold, not affordable housing.
Yeah.
I
Well,
might.
this week's news is there's no parking spaces left in the airport on the ramp. And it's not because they have more planes, but because the people who buy $20 million houses can afford bigger planes. So they can also afford $8 loaves of bread.
To just segue on that topic for a minute, the joint meeting of the select boards of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket yesterday, Dawn Holgate made a comment that I thought was really, really on point. And that she said that, the changes that we're seeing tend to widen the gap. So as Lee was just pointing out, the jets are bigger for the people who can afford to come here. Where the top end is getting further and further away from the middle. And it makes it really hard to provide resources for people when there's a small number of people taking up a larger and larger amount of resources, like parking bigger jets on the runway or on the tarmac.
Some towns have maximum size. So Jackson Hole, for instance, the bigger planes, and I guess the private planes that are the size of commercial jets would be still very big. But we could consider, not that the airport is our area, but there are ways you can sort of discourage the large planes from landing. Environmental impact, loss of space, the different municipal reasons why you might want to.
Well, we used to have those constraints, but we made the airport bigger. We made the town pier bigger. We made the boats that bring people here bigger. And this is what we're getting is, the people who can consume are the people who come here. But
I have a question, maybe Mary, on the existing master plan for the entire island. I'm just curious about the economic development portion of it and how our portion relates to that. I mean, I know we're on the edge of the commercial downtown. I know that we're not the area on the island responsible for the major economic development. So I'm just wondering, what piece of that or how the island-wide master plan deals with economic development. Is it something that we need to be doing? Is it something we need to further develop our island economically? Or is it or is it primarily focused on controlling and adjusting and putting an emphasis in certain places and not in others?
So I've got the master plan up on my other screen. Give me a second to go through it.
Mary, while you're doing that, I recall very clearly Andrew Vorse suggesting that the master plan guides zoning. And so of all the things that we talked about, I suspect that the consolidated master plan will be addressing the use chart and the application of zoning, for example, to businesses. So many of Allison's points, dormitories for construction workers, affordable, small shops with affordable goods. These would probably show up in zoning. So I'd be interested to hear what you found.
So because I did review this section recently, there's a couple of things I wanted to get back to. So in the master plan, there's a paragraph here. The fluctuation of the labor force suggests that seasonal jobs are either held by people who do not live on Nantucket or by Nantucket residents who enter and leave the workforce seasonally. It's important to note that although the highest amount of future job growth is in the service and retail sectors, the projected workforce need is consistent between the seasons. So they did some modeling over, how many workers we need. It says for year-round residents, the most likely future job growth is in the construction industry. However, this projected trend appears to begin to level out over time, as shown in the figure. Much of the construction-related activity revolves around second vacation home market. As new starts in construction slow due to the inevitable build-out, residents of Nantucket will need to seek other sources for year-round employment. And so that sentence to me really points us in the direction we need to create other kinds of year-round employment that are not as strongly dependent on the building industry. So that drives a lot of my thought.
Said that they're not dependent on the service or the retail that predominates.
Yeah, the growth is likely to be in service and retail, and those are also seasonal. So for year-round employment, if we want to have a year-round community, we need year-round jobs as well as year-round housing. If construction is not able to provide the bulk of those year-round jobs, something else has to.
Right. So that's where you're turning to the makers or the artists or
restaurants that are open year-round instead of seasonally, or supporting businesses with better Wi-Fi and other things that they need.
It reminds me a lot of what a lot of the work that Remain does, kind of behind the scenes, very strongly. And it also reminds me of Walter Bonneke and the way he started with the Jared Coffin House and got Nantucket Looms going for that very reason, long before we anybody was talking about, the island as a sustainable trades. And they started with the sheep for creating the wool for Nantucket Looms. It didn't work, except the looms is still with us, but the sheep part didn't. But, in restoring the Jared Coffin House, I remember they were creating all the fabrics for that restoration.
Well, that's the challenge. And I see Lee has his hand up, Henry, if you want to go to him.
Yeah, so let's face facts. The largest employer on the island is education, it's the school system. The second largest employer is the hospital, both of which are having trouble finding places to live for their employees. And they are year-round. I think number 3 would be town workers. DPW probably has in all 30 people. The sewer plant, the water system, that's easily another 20 people. So I would say town is 3rd. And then we get into retail, and those elements of retail like Stop and Shop, which are hugely dependent on H-2B visa people. You can almost identify where you are by the accent of the people speaking, because Stop and Shop will be Jamaica and someplace else.
Let's not.
Okay, you're right. But hugely dependent on incoming personnel.
Yeah, so
All of them have
what I was
trouble
gonna,
finding a place to live.
what I was gonna say is that Nantucket's history is, you know, century after century of looking for something that provides year-round sustenance. And the only two things that have ever worked, and they've tried a lot of them, is whaling and tourism. And so right now we have tourism as the, you know, it's ingrained in the memory of longtime Nantucketers that that is the only thing that keeps you alive through the winter. And so it's very hard to challenge the idea of tourism and the real estate industry as, you know, as being something that might need to be held back. You know, and I mean, that's just, it's baked into long-term residents here, that those are the sacred cows that, you know, that keep us alive. And, you know, and not without good reason, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look for ways to work around the margins.
Yeah, Mary, fishing, it's a several $1 million a year business, particularly with shellfishing.
But it's almost gone.
But tourism, well, here and there. Tourism, on the other hand, is $1 billion a year business. I've got my fingers crossed that we'll fix the eelgrass problem and we'll have fresh scallops next winter.
So tell me what you think about remote workers. I mean, that changed tremendously during COVID. I know
That was forecast in the master plan. Perhaps the most threatening trend to the year-round workforce is commuters from the mainland arriving by plane or ferry on a daily basis. Now, obviously, at that time, remote work was not really an option, but it's the same concept. People who don't live here but have the jobs here. And at the joint select board meeting yesterday, I mean, Libby flat out admitted that, you know, we have 2.6% unemployment in Massachusetts. That's extremely low. And Nantucket cannot find, and the Vineyard also said they cannot find people to fill positions. And so if we're going to deliver the services that we have to deliver, we need to really look at remote and commuting workforce because there's just no other option if they can't live here.
Well, I think Marcia was saying the other way, that people can
Yes.
live here now that couldn't before.
Oh,
because-
reverse. I'm sorry, Marcia.
Yeah, so that remote
Yes.
is an option.
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
I was talking about
that's what I'm doing.
are living here, yes,
Yeah.
who are living here. Because they can work remotely.
Right.
Well,
which is-
that
Sorry.
gets me right back at internet access.
Yes, I was gonna say that
That's
too.
what makes it possible.
To make it, to support people who are working in town, particularly those who are working remotely, you need better and consistent and reliable internet.
I mean, I've had a number of people stay with me in an Airbnb, you know, for a couple of months and working remotely and not having a complaint about the internet. So I'm not questioning that it does exist, but it has never come up as an issue. So it's not that we can't always improve, but I do think that that's something to consider.
Mhm. Or you just manage their expectations really well, Marcia. So that it didn't
Well, we've
complain.
never-
when it happened.
I don't know, we've never been out, you know, we've never had an issue, but anyway.
Right.
Good for you. I have issues. And I see issues reported all the time in Facebook groups, you know, people saying, hey, I'm having trouble with Comcast, anybody else? So there are definitely issues. It depends partly on where you are on the island.
Right. Huh. So are we in a good place in our town area plan for internet? No?
So far, I have to say we are. I ship files all over the world, no problem.
Right. So anyway, it just would seem to be something that we could include in this section.
I've already written it down, internet support, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, encouraging remote workers. who already have own housing.
So, Marcia, so we might propose that the Chamber of Commerce, create some sort of club or support system for remote workers, or that the Culture and Tourism Office creates social activities, or or that a couple of people I think have tried to create co-working spaces so that people could go to an office and work and didn't have to work out of their home if they didn't have the right facilities. So there are definitely things that can be done. Portugal, for a while, was actively encouraging people to come live in Portugal and work remotely. And that had some pluses and minuses, but I've read about several different locations that have actively courted people who love to travel and work from anywhere.
Right.
And so it's something that's being done in the world, and something we could look at to see if there is a capacity here to encourage that.
Well, I mean, if people own the housing, it's kind of part of that encouragement for the quality of life, and just to have the services here that people would question in terms of what Lee was saying were the top employers. The quality of the education and the quality of the hospital is definitely our two areas that we read in the survey people had issues with if they were to live here year round. So I just, I think encouraging people, I mean, anybody who has housing or can rent a space in a house that's in our area can work in that space, right? It's not restricted anywhere. Yeah.
So I shared the draft with Lee and Henry and Mary as well. Marcia, I didn't mean to keep you out, but I just was trying to do it without looking away too long. But there are some open questions that I can sort of pull out, Lee, and send to you, given the notes I was taking, plus some of the things. Anything I've underlined in the draft is sort of a question to the group. Plus, there's a list at the end of sort of what's the next step. How do we make sure this makes sense for this group, and I can keep working on it with Mary's support.
Allison, I'm writing down your comment as Allison King asks for input from members of the planning work group, in particular to the open questions in her draft.
Excellent, thank you.
Were there any of those questions that you wanted to try to address now that we didn't land on?
I think the sort of biggest one from my perspective in terms of lift is whether or not we do want to go through that WPI report and sort of determine how many inns we have in the area and how many sort of other types of businesses, or do we just want to have, I just don't know how much support we want to put in our report, because I read some of the other reports and it looks lovely. And so I wanted to make sure that I was being as responsive to that as possible. But there are problems with the WPI report. As I pointed out, it doesn't actually address some of the issues that we're hoping to do. And it also doesn't talk about the businesses that come into our neighborhood. So I think that's really the most sort of the largest open item. The others are ones that we can discuss as well. But that to me is the sort of, what do we want? What sort of data do we want to have in support of our report?
Because, for me, it's kind of like that I would like to have the data, but and have it translated into a statement about how do we describe the state of our economic development of our area? How do we describe that to somebody who knows nothing about Nantucket and say, well, we're working on this area, so what? And so the data certainly for me always helps, and to describe and something that we know about what kind of economic activity happens in our area? And is it, how do we look at it? I mean, are we all comfortable with that even without survey data? Do we think that it's doing and being at creating the kind of neighborhoods and environment that I don't think I mean, we know that we're not responsible in this area for a major economic, we're not the school and we're not the, we're not the hospital, right? So
Right.
what is, I mean, it's kind of linked to me to part of the questions I came up with in working on the housing, which I'm still on, but it's like, well, what do you want from us? Kind of like we're not the whole open island, it's just, it's a dense area already. Do you want us to build some more apartments? I don't think so. Like, what do you want us to be or do? But I think, I love, having landed upon diversity and the sense of something that can go beyond the retail and the construction and something that can be kind of a standalone. But I would, if I was just coming in cold reading the report, I'd want to know or get a sense of where are we in it? Have we changed over the years? Are we good? Are we, and we know we've all spoken about the grandfathering of some of the spaces that used to be actively bringing in an income, but
That's helpful. I'll go through the I've been a little remiss. I will go through it, spend more time reviewing it. I'm learning all sorts of street names that I had no idea what they were or where they were on the island. So it's been useful. But yeah, I'll continue to do that. And then I think I'll talk to Mary about what we can do with it, because there are a lot of sort of addresses and then blanks in terms of the type of business it is and the way it was described to us, that those are sometimes individual proprietors running a business out of their house, and they may be doing it under a DBA. So it's not perfect, but I will make it as specific to the area as possible, and then we can see what we can pull from it.
yeah, I mean, it makes me kind of wonder about Remain. I wonder what kind of data they've got, because they started with Mitchell's, they've done the school, they've done the bakery, they've done the culinary center.
Right. I did reach out to them. I did reach out to them to see if they had anything and did not hear a response, but it was a cold email and they may not have known who I was asking.
Yeah, Allison, I might be able to help with that. I know everybody over at Remain. So.
Yeah, because they may have done an economic development survey of the area. I don't know, but we did know that the this was the Commerce, right? Is that right, Mary? Who did the WPI?
Commerce, yeah.
Or Commerce did. So it's island wide, but I can. So maybe Remain has something that's specific to this area.
Their executive director used to be with the Artists Association, and I suspect many of us know Cecil Jensen.
Yeah, I worked for the Artists Association for Cecil, so yeah.
Yeah, just knowing how they're so focused on downtown revitalization. And so I think they probably consider us somewhat part of the downtown. And so it'd be nice to kind of get a clearer sense also of the work they're doing and what their goals are. And maybe, maybe we're just supporting their recommendations. I don't know, but it would be great to know how we're in alignment or not with what they're already doing.
Anything else?
Well, we can talk about it now or we can talk about it later, but there were questions of so people who come into our area and work, particularly construction workers, maintenance workers. I have a building across from me they're working on, and everyone was parking on the street at first, and now they're all parking in the garden, which to me makes more sense because the fire trucks kept coming down Darling to see if they could fit, and they couldn't, and so they pivoted pretty nicely. But do we as a group want to suggest other suggested limitations, restrictions on construction sites, or I think we talked about Mary accommodations for them in some way, but I don't remember what the examples were for accommodations.
So I worked for a construction company for a while. And one of our sites, the owner did not want 20 trucks parked on the site. So we were able to find an off-site parking place for the workers. And then we provided a van to take them to the job site, each morning and bring them back to the parking at the end of the day. And that might be a good model for the in-town, because when you have so many workers on a house, it's a real significant impact on narrow streets and small neighborhoods with highly dense dwellings to have to accommodate those.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be great. And I definitely think it's interesting to kind of be encouraging something that has to do with our economic development and taking some more restriction kind of control to make it work for everyone.
Well, that's sort of the idea of this part of the report, is that in order to accommodate and in order to encourage economic development, the quality of life still has to be good. So your remote workers need to be able to have a conference call without, 25 people walking outside of their window all day. So I think there's a balance, right, between encouraging economic development, but also making sure that those others who are developing economically have some space to do their work. And I like Mary's idea of the accommodations and / restrictions, because I think
that's right. Yeah, I mean, it even has to do with the Highline boat that leaves at what, 4:20 or 4:40? I mean, what happens to the rest of the residents? Especially when the steamship fast ferry isn't running. I mean, that's just a kind of a minor adjustment or suggestion, but to have an extra boat.
Marcia, you put your finger on a substantial change in the island. It wasn't that long ago that most of these people, most people arrived on the airplane shuttle. You showed up at the desk and they said, "You're in section 4. When they call 4, give us this card." Now, security issues and others, it's not cheap to fly. And so everybody's on the boat.
Everybody. Yeah. And especially on the boat that's returning every day, or especially at the end of the week. And that has a major impact on school groups, on residents year round.
Yeah, and so they get on the boat at 6:10 in Hyannis. And when they get off the boat, they look for their truck that's been parked overnight right underneath the sign that says no overnight parking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's frustrating. My family shared a bench seat with a bunch of construction workers when we were here in February, trying to get off the island. And they're very nice, but it was still, it's very crowded. Okay, so I think we have sort of directions there. The next one was the pop-up shops for weekend installations. And that's obviously something no one has to have an opinion on right now, but it's something we should think about. Is that, do we want to encourage those or suggest them as a potential source for businesses in our area to be able to, or people who are makers in the area to be able to sell their goods?
I think it sounds great. Is that something that just happens outdoors, outside of their existing structure, correct? Or pop-up, or no?
No, it can be inside.
I was thinking more like the sustainable market that happens, Saturday mornings downtown, where a public space is taken over for this pop-up market. So just, off the top of my head, for instance, perhaps the Land Bank Park at the Civil War Monument on Main Street would be a central location that could accommodate some tables or something. It probably the traffic there is way too bad and there's not enough parking right there, but just thinking of spaces like that that might accommodate some business activity for the benefit of the community. So, not somebody trying to sell timeshare units, but,
Yeah,
yeah,
but not necessarily on private land.
yeah, right, not necessarily restricted
it
to one's own property, right?
You could do it on private land, right? Just like you do a yard sale,
Right,
right?
right.
It just seems to me like it would be less offensive potentially to people that don't like the mixed use zoning, just to have it happen every now and then. Right? So it's not like a full-time
Mhm.
retail shop. It's just something that is.
Yeah, so right now, I think the bylaw that allows a home-based business has restrictions that say that you cannot have people coming to the premises to pick up goods. You can't sell from your front door. But what Marcia, I think what you're saying is, perhaps we could put in a provision to allow, X number of times a year for temporary sales as an event.
Right, yeah, I think it would be great. Yeah, I think it would do what we're talking about, short of getting greater mixed use in here, but I think it would be great. What do you all think?
It's worth a discussion.
Mhm.
Do you know how they do the farmer's market? Is that specified Saturdays from,
Yes, so they have to apply to the town for a permit. They have to coordinate with events at the church. So sometimes the church is having their own event and does not want the market blocking the church. And so some requests are not granted because there's a conflict, but it's run by the town. The street is a public way. So if it was going to be on land bank property, then you would have to go to the land bank as well, probably to the town for the event. Any private property, you would have to go, to that owner. Hadwin House Garden or some such, maybe there's a plant sale there. I don't know, but so there would be permitting involved. If they're selling any food, their health department would need to have certain requirements met. I'm just thinking of all the things we went through with the Island Fair every year. We have to get permission from people, we have to get permits, we have to get inspections, we have to submit plans for how things are going to work. And not on the scale of the Island Fair in town, hopefully, but some of those same rules apply.
so each artisan gets a permit from the town?
No, the market handles who shows up. So the market gets the permit from the town. So whoever the sponsoring organization is. Now, if the town wanted to run it, then probably each individual vendor would have to get a permit from the town. But I don't think the town really wants to step into that kind of a activity.
I know each vendor has to have insurance too.
Mm.
But the NHA does the fall fair days on the grounds at the mill, and so there are people who are able to take advantage of their own property to do events. This would be a little bit different in scope, I think, where we're trying to get multiple small people together, or even just on an individual basis, sort of a like we did with the Island Fair when we didn't have the Island Fair, but we had the Family Fun Day. We got a number of different sites to put out different activities, and we just coordinated the advertising for it.
Okay, I will revise to sort of put all that in there as well. And I think the last one is not really a question. I think we need someone that we've identified, Amy Baxter, as a potential speaker to tell us about what is the town doing to encourage businesses to be open year round. And then sort of after that meeting, perhaps we can have an opinion on what we think the town should continue or contract or grow. the way to put it, yes.
Amy can also talk about those pop-up shop permits.
Great.
So we want Amy as a speaker?
And she's
Yeah.
probably reached a lull in her workload because her spring is a tremendous amount of work. But hopefully now everybody has the permits for what they're doing this summer.
Yeah, we just need to be careful with the speakers. Summer is coming to a close. But yeah, I will be in contact with them. For our next meeting,
Sure.
okay, anything else?
That's it for us, right, Mary?
Just a reminder, I don't know if anybody was thinking of adding comments by email, but that is not something that we should do. We should keep all discussions in the open meeting.
Mary, if they respond directly to Allison, would that be an abuse?
So the issue would be if a quorum of members all sent responses to Allison, then it becomes sort of a walking conversation. So when two people are working on a topic, just the two of them, that's not really a violation. But if all of us start corresponding on a single topic, then you're getting into dangerous waters.
But it strikes me, Mary, that we could write to Allison and she would collect them and then present them for consideration at the next meeting. And until they were considered, would not be part of the record.
Right, as long as you're not having a conversation back and forth or having a conversation where Lee writes to Allison and Allison says to me, here's what Lee said. And I say to Henry, oh, this is interesting. It gets dangerous very quickly.
Okay, I'll put a note to watch open meeting law in responses because Allison has asked for input.
Yes.
I'm also a corporate lawyer who used to run proxies and other disclosure documents, so I'm very good at collecting comments.
Okay,
I'm
great.
happy to do so.
My daughter's an attorney as well.
Oh, good.
My sympathies.
No, we need more women. We got to change the industry somehow.
Okay, anything else? I have 4:58. Motion to adjourn.
Motion,
I'll second Marcia's motion.
Okay, Marcia. Okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Bye.
We're out of here. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you all.
good. Thanks, everyone. It's great.